What comes out of discussions, whether education is a public or private good, concerns the fundamental nature of education policy in our country. Ultimately, it's something that Americans are very concerned with, because of which the federal government has becoming more and more involved in it as time has moved on. Because of this, the news media, as well as political candidates, are turning their attention on educational policy issues. Ultimately, new issues are being brought up to a point of public salience. That is, they're coming up to a point where the public is turning their attention to them. Things like access to education and the cost of public education, as well as the funding and quality of primary education. So then, what is the government's role in primary education? In particular, who should be in charge of the provision of it? What level of government, be it the federal, the state, or the local? When we consider the idea of a public education, we're talking about providing some sort of education for the government to meet its goals, which again were intellectual development, civic education, and workforce preparation. Historically, education policy was handled by our states and local governments, and it varied by which state you lived in. The funding mechanisms, as well as what was taught to the students in the state, was determined between the states and the local governments, because these two institutions were aware of the local governmental needs and the needs of the students. However, beginning in the 1960s, the federal government started to take a larger role in public education. President LBJ argued that full educational opportunity should be our first national goal. In doing so, he worked very hard to pass the ESEA, or the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This provided new grants to districts serving low-income students, which correlated highly with African American districts. These grants were used for textbooks, library books, and ultimately college scholarships down the line. The goal here was to decrease the educational gap between white and black students. The ESEA still exists today. Remember No Child Left Behind, or the Every Student Succeeds Act? These are nothing more than reauthorizations of the 1965 bill.